Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The snows of the north had never truly melted. Even after the long night had passed and dawn had returned to the world, the wind still carried with it the whisper of the dead. Men told themselves the war was over, that the White Walkers had been banished beyond the wall once more. Yet in the deep woods and the frozen valleys, something ancient still lingered. Something that watched. Sir Auric Snow had learned long ago that the North kept its secrets. Bastard son of House Stark, he bore no crest upon his cloak, only the direwolf stitched in plain gray thread, a quiet token from Lord Cregan himself. When he rode through the gates of Winterfell that morning, frost rimed the stones and smoke curled from the great hall's chimneys. The war was done, but the realm was restless. Ravens had come from the mountain clans, hunters missing, villages abandoned, strange lights seen beyond the frost fangs. Lord Cregan met him in the great hall, his voice low, his eyes sharp as the blade at his belt. "There are whispers, Auric," he said. "Old things stirring where no man should tread. I would not send one of my true-born sons. This task calls for someone who knows shadows." Auric bowed. "Then shadows I shall walk, my lord." The next morning he rode out through the Wolf's Wood with only 4 companions. Maester Corin, gray-haired and quick-tongued, insisted on joining. "For the sake of the records," he said, though Auric suspected curiosity had lured him more than duty. Harl of the Rills, a scarred veteran of the Night's Watch, had fought the Walkers before and carried the haunted silence of one who had seen too much. Branwen, a wildling woman who knew the mountain paths better than any man, served as their guide. And lastly, Tommen, a young squire from the south, eager to prove his courage in a land that seemed to have no mercy for the living. Their journey north was a cold one. The trees grew sparse and crooked, their branches heavy with ice. Each night, they made camp by small fires that hissed and spat, as if protesting the cold. The maester's ravens circled high above them, black specks against a pale, endless sky. "Do you think they're gone for good?" Tommen asked one night, his teeth chattering as he huddled near the flames. "The Walkers?" Harl replied without looking up. "Aye, lad, until they're not." Branwen snorted softly. "You Southerners never learn. The cold doesn't forget. It waits." Auric said nothing. He kept his gaze on the fire, but his mind wandered northward beyond the wall where shadows moved like living mist. He had been there once, during the last winter's war, and he still remembered the sound, that terrible, mournful song of ice against ice when the dead came walking. On the 4th night, the wind shifted. It carried with it a scent unlike any other. Not decay, not snow, but something metallic, like blood frozen in steel. The horses grew restless. Even the Maester's ravens refused to land. At dawn, they reached the first village, or what was left of it. The huts were half buried in frost, doors hanging open, tools scattered in the snow. Not a sound stirred save the creaking of timbers under ice. Harl dismounted first, sword drawn. "Gods," whispered Tommen. "Where are the people?" Branwen knelt by a trail of footprints that led toward the woods. Small prints, perhaps children's, but they ended abruptly, as though swallowed by the snow itself. "They didn't leave," she said. "They were taken." Maester Corin examined the walls of a hut, tracing strange marks carved into the wood, spirals and jagged lines. symbols that seemed to twist even as one looked at them. "These are not of the first men," he murmured, "nor of the children. Older, perhaps." Harl spat. "Older than the children? You'd best keep your tales for the hearth, Meister." But Arik felt it too, the weight of those marks, the faint hum in the air, as though the ice itself remembered. They buried what bones they could find and moved on before nightfall. The frost fangs loomed ahead, jagged peaks shrouded in mist. The closer they drew, the more the world grew silent. Even the wind dared not speak. That night, Branwen woke them with a hissed warning. Shapes moved at the edge of the firelight, tall, heavy forms that did not quite walk but glided across the snow. Harl was first to raise his blade, but the shapes melted back into the darkness before he could strike. "They watch," Branwen whispered. "Not walkers, something else." The next morning, the world had changed. The snow beneath their camp was not just frozen, but hardened, turned to a pale stone, smooth as glass. In its surface were impressions of great hands, clawed and deep. Arik knelt, touching the strange frost stone. It was cold enough to burn. "This isn't the work of the dead," he said quietly. Meister Corin's face had gone pale. "No," he agreed, "something older. The legends speak of it, the Stoneborn, servants of the earth who slept beneath the ice before the first men came. If the White Walkers were the children of winter, these were the bones of the world itself." Tommen laughed uneasily. "Stone giants, that's children's talk." But none of them laughed for long. That night, the ground trembled, not like thunder, but like breath drawn from the belly of the earth. The fire flickered blue, and somewhere in the dark, something answered with a low, grinding moan. Arik rose, hand on sword, eyes fixed on the frozen hills. "The White Walkers," he murmured, "were not the first enemy." The others stared at him, the meaning sinking in like frost into flesh. And in that moment, the mountain moved. Morning came cold and colorless. The fire had long since died, leaving only a crust of ash that gleamed faintly beneath the new snow. Arik stood at the edge of the camp, his sword drawn, eyes fixed upon the slope where the mountain had seemed to stir. For a long while, nothing moved, only the wind curling between the stones, whispering through the bones of the world. Yet the silence felt alive, as if the very land held its breath. When the sun broke through the clouds, they saw what the night had hidden. Half the hillside had collapsed, revealing a wall of smooth gray rock, veined with ice like pale blue fire. But it was not a natural cliff. Its face was carved with vast runes, each symbol large enough for a man to stand within. Their shapes twisted and bent, old as the world, and in the center stood a great doorway sealed by a single slab of stone. Branwen's voice trembled as she spoke. That door was not made by mortal hands. Maester Corin stepped forward, his breath rising in small, hurried clouds. He brushed away snow with his gloves, tracing the carvings with reverent care. "These are no runes of the first men. Look here. Spirals within spirals, the mark of the deep folk. It is said they were the first to shape the earth before the dawn of humankind." "Deep folk?" Tommen echoed. "You mean dwarfs?" The Meister shook his head. "Not dwarfs, boy. Gods of stone. They say they built fortresses beneath the frost fangs, their hearts burning with the fires of the earth. But when the long night came, their forges went cold, and the world buried them in frost." Harl grunted. "And we're standing here, staring at their grave. Let's move on." But Arik was not so certain. The door drew him, as if the air itself hummed with a power he could not name. He pressed his palm against the stone, and it pulsed faintly beneath his glove, alive or dreaming. That night, the wind carried a strange sound, a faint beating, deep and slow, like the heart of a slumbering beast. None could tell where it came from. The horses stamped and whinnied, and the fire guttered as though choked by unseen hands. "Something's under us," Branwen muttered, tightening her furs around her shoulders. "Sleeping maybe, but waking soon." Arik gave the order to keep watch in pairs, though the darkness felt thicker than any he had known. When his turn came, he and Harl sat back to back, the fire burning low between them. "Do you believe the Meister's tales?" Arik asked quietly. Harl spat into the snow. "I believe in what kills men: cold, hunger, steel, not fairy stone monsters." Yet before dawn, even Harl's certainty began to waver, for when they rose to break camp, they found the snow around them pressed with enormous prints, 5-fingered, deep as a man's arm, leading away toward the mountain shadow. By midday, the sky had grown dark, though no storm brewed. They followed the prints through a narrow pass where the walls of ice glimmered faintly with trapped light. At the far end, they found a body half buried in frost. It was no villager. The corpse was armored in black stone, its surface carved with those same twisting runes, and within the helm's hollow eye sockets glowed faint traces of blue fire. Tommen stumbled backward, his face pale. "Seven, save us." Meister Korin knelt beside it, his breath trembling. "This is no statue," he whispered. "It lived." "Not anymore," Harl said grimly, driving his blade through the chest. The sound it made was not of flesh, but of shattering rock. When the blade struck true, a gust of freezing air burst forth, scattering snow like shards of glass. Beneath the wreckage, Arik glimpsed a small object, round, metallic, faintly humming. He lifted it from the snow. It was a sphere of black iron, etched with spirals that seemed to move when he looked too long. "Put it down," Branwen hissed. "That's not meant for us." But Arik could not. The moment he touched it, a whisper brushed against his mind. Not words, but feelings. Cold, ancient hunger, and the memory of stone cracking under the weight of time. He slid it into his pouch, though the Meister's eyes lingered on him with unease. That night, the mountain groaned again. This time, they saw it clearly. The ground trembled as a fissure opened where the door had stood. From the chasm spilled a thin mist that glowed faintly in the dark, and from within that mist came the sound of grinding stone and shattering ice. "Arik," Harl said, gripping his sword. "We should run." But it was too late. Shapes emerged, massive, towering forms of stone and frost, their eyes burning faintly blue. Each step they took cracked the frozen earth beneath them. The Stoneborn had awoken. They moved not like beasts, nor like men, but with slow, dreadful purpose. The first reached their camp and crushed a wagon beneath its hand. Harl's sword met its arm, but the blade shattered like glass. "Back," Arik shouted. "To the ridge!" They fled through the snow, the creatures advancing behind them with thunderous strides. Tommen stumbled, his cry lost to the storm of noise. Arik turned, saw one of the Stoneborn reach down, and in a moment, the boy was gone beneath its hand. Branwen loosed a desperate arrow, the shaft splintering harmlessly against its chest. "They can't be killed," she cried. "Everything can be killed," Arik growled, drawing his dagger. He reached into his pouch and grasped the sphere. It burned cold against his skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. The nearest Stoneborn halted, its eyes flickering. The others froze as well, their forms trembling like mountains before collapse. Arik raised the sphere high, and the runes upon it flared to life. The creatures moaned, the sound like boulders grinding in agony, and one by one they sank back into the snow, motionless once more. When silence returned, Arik fell to his knees, the sphere smoking faintly in his hand. Branwen stared at him with wide eyes. "What did you do?" "I don't know," he breathed. "But whatever this is, it commands them." Maester Corin's face was pale as parchment. "If that is true," he said softly, "then you now hold the key to a power older than man or magic, and if the Stoneborn serve it still—" Arik looked toward the mountain, where the great door now lay open, its depths black as night. The cold wind sighed through the fissure like a voice calling his name. "Then something waits inside," he said, "something that never died." And in the echo of those words, the faint tremor of the earth began again, steady, rhythmic, like the slow beating of a heart beneath the frozen world. They stood before the wound in the mountain, where the frost had split like flesh torn by a blade. The air that breathed from within was not merely cold, it carried with it the taste of something ancient, sharp, and metallic, as if the earth itself bled unseen beneath its crust. Snow drifted lazily around them, yet none dared to move. The Stoneborn had fallen still, half buried in the ice, their limbs frozen mid-step. In the pale dawn light, they seemed almost statues again, monuments to an age that had never been meant to wake. But the silence that followed their retreat was not peace, it was waiting. Maester Corin knelt beside one of the fallen giants, his quill trembling as he sketched its runes upon a scrap of parchment. "Do you see, Sir Arik, the patterns? Each spiral leads inward toward a single point, a heart perhaps. These were not creatures of mindless stone. They were crafted, shaped with purpose." Branwen spat into the snow. "Crafted by whom?" Corin's eyes glinted. "By the same power that forged the White Walkers, I suspect. But this came first. Ice and fire were born in war, but stone is older than both." Arik turned his gaze toward the yawning black of the doorway. From that darkness came a low hum, like the distant tolling of a bell deep underground. "If there is purpose behind them, we will find it there." Harl frowned, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "We barely survived their first waking, boy. Go into their den, and you won't come out again." Arik's jaw tightened. "If they rise again, the North will fall before a word can reach Winterfell. We can't turn back now." The old ranger met his eyes for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then I'll follow you. But if I die in a hole of ice, I'm haunting your bastard hide." They lit torches, the flames shivering as though afraid of what lay ahead, and entered the mountain. The tunnel was wide enough for 10 men to walk abreast. Its walls gleamed with a sheen of frost that shimmered faintly blue in the torchlight. Strange carvings followed them, lines that twisted and met in spirals, runes etched deep into the rock. As they walked, the ground sloped downward, and the air grew warmer, heavy with a faint mist that smelled of iron and salt. After a while, they came upon a vast cavern. 1,000 icicles hung from the ceiling, each glowing faintly as if lit from within. At the chamber's center rose a great pillar of crystal, shot through with veins of molten gold that pulsed like veins beneath translucent skin. "The heart of the mountain," Maester Corin whispered, awe softening his voice. "It's alive." As they approached, the hum grew louder. The sphere in Arik's pouch began to vibrate, responding to the power that radiated from the pillar. "What is this place?" Tommen had died the night before, but his absence lingered, a shadow that haunted their steps. Arik found himself glancing over his shoulder more than once, half expecting the boy's voice to answer his own. Branwen placed her hand on the crystal. Frost spread outward beneath her fingers. "A forge," she said softly. "The deep folks' forge. They didn't carve stone, they gave it life." The words struck Arik like a blow. He remembered the runes carved into the Stoneborn's skin, the way they had moved when the sphere had pulsed in his hand. "They were born here," he said. "Made here." Corin nodded. "And something still makes them." As if in answer, the pillar began to change. The golden veins brightened, then split into countless threads that crept across the floor toward the walls. The runes carved into the stone began to glow. The hum deepened into a thunderous rhythm, echoing through their bones. "Back!" Harl barked, shoving the maester aside just as cracks split across the ground. The stone under their feet rippled, shifting like liquid. From the walls, shapes began to emerge, figures of rock and ice, their bodies half-formed, faces still locked in the sleep of ages. "They're waking again!" Branwen cried. Arik drew the sphere from his pouch. It burned in his palm, the runes upon it alive with blue light. The Stoneborn halted mid-motion, their eyes dimming, but the crystal in the center of the cavern answered with a roar like the shattering of the world. The light from within blazed gold, then white, and for a heartbeat all sound vanished. When Arik's vision cleared, the cavern lay in ruin. The crystal's surface was fractured, lines of molten light bleeding from its heart. The Stoneborn stood frozen once more, but something had changed. The runes across their bodies no longer glowed blue. They burned with a dull red heat. Maester Corin's voice trembled. "You broke the seal. Gods preserve us. You woke the forge itself." The ground shuddered again, and the air grew thick with heat. From the fissures beneath the crystal, molten rock began to ooze, glowing like dragonfire. A single shape rose from the center, a figure larger than the rest, its form half flesh, half stone, eyes blazing like twin suns. It spoke, though its voice was more like the grinding of mountains. "The blood of men returns to the deep." Branwen fell to her knees. "What is it saying?" "It knows us," Arik murmured. "It remembers." The creature stepped forward, the air trembling with its weight. Around its neck hung a shard of crystal identical to the sphere Arik held. Its gaze fell upon the sphere, and a deep sound echoed through the cavern, something between a growl and a sigh. "You carry the heart of the forge," it said. "Return it, or the north shall bleed again." Arik hesitated. He could feel the pull within his chest, as if the sphere wished to fly from his grasp and rejoin the crystal heart. But he also felt something else, the weight of all who would die if he obeyed. "What happens if I return it?" The creature's molten eyes flickered. "The world will remember its first masters. And if I refuse, then the mountain shall rise, and stone will walk once more." The heat grew unbearable. Cracks split the cavern walls, and streams of fire bled upward from the depths. "Arik!" Harl shouted. "Decide!" He looked down at the sphere, its surface swirling with light and shadow. In that moment, he saw more than stone. He saw the reflection of men long dead, their faces twisted by greed and fear. He saw Winterfell buried in ash, the wall crumbling under the weight of mountains that walked. He tightened his grip. "You were never meant to rule again." With a shout, he hurled the sphere against the crystal. It struck, and the world exploded. A wave of white fire consumed the chamber, searing through air and stone alike. The mountain roared as though it felt pain for the first time in 1,000 years. Arik was thrown backward, the light swallowing everything. When he awoke, the cavern was silent. The crystal lay in shattered fragments, its glow extinguished. The Stoneborn were motionless once more, broken, lifeless, their red light gone dark. Branwen knelt beside him, her face streaked with soot and tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You killed them." But Maester Corin's voice was low, grim. "He did more than that. He broke the binding. Whatever power kept them asleep is gone. The world may not see their like again, but it will feel their echo. The earth remembers its gods." Arik stared into the ruins, the smell of burnt stone heavy in the air. Beyond the shattered cavern, a thin line of dawn crept down through the mountain's cracks, pale and trembling. The war of winter had ended once. Now, another kind of war had begun, one older than any man could name, and somewhere beneath the frost, the mountain's heart still beat. For 3 days, the mountain burned. Smoke rose from its peaks, curling into the pale northern sky like the ghost of a slain god. The snow melted in rivers down the slopes, hissing where it met the ice below. When the fire finally died, silence returned, heavy, watchful, and wrong. Sir Arik Snow stood at the mouth of the cavern, his cloak torn and blackened by soot. Behind him lay the shattered forge, the broken remains of the Stoneborn scattered across the floor, like the ruins of statues toppled by time. Yet he felt no triumph, only the dull weight of knowing something vast and ancient had been disturbed. Branwen leaned against a fallen pillar, her breath ragged. The wildling's face was streaked with grime, but her eyes still burned fierce. "You broke their heart," she said, "but the mountain still lives. Can you hear it?" Arik could. Beneath the stillness, a faint rhythm pulsed, a heartbeat deep within the stone. Slow, steady, eternal. "The forge may be broken," Maester Corin murmured, "but the power that fed it remains." He knelt among the fragments of crystal, gathering small shards into a pouch. Each piece shimmered faintly, veins of gold running through them like trapped lightning. "This is not the end. It is a beginning." Harl spat. "A beginning of what? We barely crawled out alive." "Knowledge," the Maester said, his voice distant. "Proof that the stories were true. That man was never the first to shape this world." Arik turned toward the mountain's entrance. "Then let's make sure man is the last." They descended from the Frostfangs in grim silence. The once white valleys were scarred by veins of black rock where molten fire had cooled. Steam rose from cracks in the earth. The air itself seemed changed, thicker, heavier, as if burdened by the memory of what had awoken. By the second day, snow began to fall again, soft and clean, covering the scars. But the peace it promised was false. That night, while they made camp in the shadow of a ruined pass, Harl took first watch. When Arik woke at dawn, he found the old ranger gone. His sword lay in the snow, half buried. Nearby, the ground was disturbed, heavy prints leading away toward the north. Branwen examined them, her expression unreadable. "These aren't the prints of man or beast. He didn't walk away. He was taken." "Taken by what?" Arik asked. She pointed toward the horizon, where the snow swirled around jagged peaks like smoke. "Whatever still listens beneath the ice." The loss struck harder than Arik had expected. Harl had been hard and bitter, but steadfast. A man forged in the long winters. Now his absence left a hollow space, as though the cold itself had swallowed him whole. They pressed on toward the south, hoping to reach the foothills before the next storm. Yet as they traveled, Arik began to notice the signs. The earth trembled softly at times, like a creature shifting in uneasy sleep. The rivers that should have frozen solid flowed warm, steaming faintly in the cold air. And once, at dusk, he saw something move beneath the surface of the snow, a shadow vast and slow, gliding underfoot like a whale beneath the sea. Branwen saw it too. "The mountain's blood is spreading," she said. "You broke its heart, but its veins run deep." By the 5th day, they reached a narrow valley where a small village clung to the frozen ground. Smoke rose from the chimneys, though the air carried no sound of men or hounds. As they approached, the silence thickened. "Stay close," Arik warned. The village was empty, doors hung open, food lay frozen upon tables, and snow had drifted through shattered windows. But there were no bodies, only the faint impression of shapes in the frost, as though the villagers had stood still and turned to ice. Maester Corin studied the marks with trembling hands. "The Stoneborn," he whispered. "No, they could not have come this far. Unless..." Arik stared at the ground. The snow was dusted with glittering fragments, tiny shards of gold-veined crystal, just like those from the forge. Unless something carried the fire with it. They spent the night in one of the empty huts, though none found sleep. Outside, the wind had changed again. It carried a low sound, not quite a howl, not quite a voice. The mountain was calling. Near dawn, Branwen shook Arik awake. Her face was pale, her bow already in hand. "Someone's out there." Through the frost-blurred window, a figure stood at the edge of the square. It was tall, cloaked in rags of frozen leather, its skin gray and cracked like stone. But its eyes were blue. "Harl," Arik breathed. He stepped outside before the others could stop him. The creature did not move as he approached, only tilted its head as if in remembrance. The shape was wrong, the body too stiff, too heavy, but the face beneath the frost was his friend's. "Harl," Arik said softly, lowering his sword. "It's me." The creature's mouth moved, the sound that came out scraping like metal on stone. "Arik!" For one dreadful heartbeat, it almost sounded human. Then the thing's arm rose, and Arik saw the veins of red crystal pulsing beneath its skin. Branwen's arrow struck first, shattering the creature's shoulder. It staggered back, howling, not in pain, but in rage. The sound echoed through the valley, and from the mountains answered others, dozens, maybe hundreds. "They followed him!" Branwen shouted. "Run!" They fled into the woods, the snow exploding behind them as the Stoneborn pursued. The forest shook with their steps. Arik led the way through twisting paths, the sound of pursuit growing closer, heavier. At last, they reached a frozen gorge, the river below hidden beneath a sheet of ice. With no other choice, Arik drew his sword and turned to face them. The first of the creatures burst through the trees. It was Harl no longer, but something older, wearing his flesh. Arik met its strike with his blade. The steel shattered against its arm. It lunged forward, seizing him by the throat, and in that moment, he saw its eyes up close. Beneath the blue, there burned a glimmer of gold, the same light as the forge. The Maester's voice rang out behind him. "The shards! Use the shards!" Arik tore free, reaching for one of the golden fragments in Corin's pouch. The shard pulsed in his grip, and when he thrust it into the creature's chest, light flared like lightning. The Stoneborn screamed, its body cracking apart, until it collapsed into dust and flame. The others halted. For a moment, the woods were still. Then, as one, the remaining Stoneborn turned and fled back toward the mountains. Arik fell to his knees, chest heaving, the shard burning cold in his hand. Maester Corin approached, his eyes wide. "You've found their bane," he whispered. "The fire that binds them can also destroy." Branwen looked toward the dark peaks rising in the distance. "Then we must return," she said. "Back to the forge. Finish what was begun." Arik closed his hand around the shard. The light within it pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat. "The mountain still lives," he said quietly. "Then we'll kill it again." Behind them, dawn broke red over the frost fangs, and the wind carried with it a sound like grinding stone, a warning or a promise. The sun was low when they turned north once more, its crimson light painting the snow in shades of blood and fire. What warmth the light might have offered was devoured by the wind, which came down from the frost fangs sharp as knives. Arik rode ahead, the shard of crystal bound in cloth at his belt, its dull glow pulsing faintly with each of his heartbeats. It seemed to guide him, tugging him onward toward the shadow of the mountain that loomed ever larger against the horizon. They no longer spoke of rest or return. The maester's face had grown drawn, his eyes hollow from the weight of what he knew. Branwen's expression was hard as carved ice, though at times Arik caught her glancing north with an unease she could not hide. They followed not a path, but a trail of ruin, the charred remnants of trees, fissures in the frozen ground where the mountain's fire had burst through the crust of the world. At dusk, they came upon a frozen lake. The ice had split in a dozen places, revealing black water that steamed faintly despite the cold. Maester Corin crouched near the edge, his breath clouding. "The warmth beneath," he said. "It should not reach this far. The mountain's blood spreads faster than I thought." Branwen cast a stone into the lake. It vanished with a hiss, and moments later the water rippled from beneath, as if something stirred far below. "The Stoneborn came this way," she said. "Their scents in the air, old earth and ash." They made camp on a rise overlooking the lake. No one lit a fire. The shard's faint light was enough to see by, and none wished to draw the gaze of whatever might watch from the darkness. Arik did not sleep. He sat with his back to the wind, his sword laid across his knees. The events of the past days drifted through his thoughts in fragments. The forge's destruction, Harl's face twisted by gold fire, the creatures that bore the shape of men, yet carried the memory of stone. He could not help but wonder what they wanted, what drove them now that their forge was broken. Near midnight, a faint tremor ran through the ground. The ice upon the lake shuddered, and mist rose from the cracks like smoke from a dying pyre. Branwen appeared beside him, silent as a shadow. "They are not gone," she whispered. "The earth still listens." "Then let it listen," Arik said. "When we return to the forge, we'll end it. No more waking gods." Branwen's gaze was distant. "You think it will end? The deep folk were the first to shape the world. Their bones lie in every mountain. You can break one heart, but not the earth itself." Before he could answer, the Maester stirred in his sleep, murmuring. His hand clutched at his satchel, as if something inside had burned him. Arik knelt beside him, and when he opened the pouch, a faint light spilled out. Another shard glowed within, a piece larger than the rest, its veins burning with both gold and blue. Corin's eyes flew open. "Don't touch it," he gasped, snatching it away. "This one, it calls to them. I took it from the forge's core before it fell. It holds what the old texts named the breath of stone." Arik frowned. "You mean it's alive?" "In a manner of speaking." The maester's voice trembled. "The forge gave breath to the Stoneborn through this. It is their heart and their memory. If they still move, it is because of this fragment." Branwen's hand went to her knife. "Then destroy it now." Corin shook his head. "Destroy it, and we destroy the last link to what they were. You saw what power it carries. We might use it to command them. End this without more death. Arik looked at him sharply. That's the same thought that doomed the first men who found the forge. Power like this doesn't serve, it devours. But the Maester only closed the satchel and turned away. Perhaps, he said softly, or perhaps the North was never meant to belong to men at all. The words hung heavy in the frozen air. When dawn came, they crossed the valley and began the climb back toward the Frostfangs. The path was steeper now, the snow brittle underfoot, the wind alive with whispers. More than once, Arik thought he saw movement in the distance, shapes that melted into mist when he looked too long. By the second day, the clouds thickened into a storm. Snow swept down from the peaks, erasing the trail behind them. The wind howled through the ravines like the cry of a dying giant. They found shelter in a narrow cave where the air was warmer than it should have been. The walls glistened faintly with veins of crystal that pulsed like distant stars. Branwen sat near the entrance, her bow across her knees. "The mountain's veins," she murmured. "They reach farther than we knew. The world beneath must be vast." Arik traced one of the glowing veins with his glove. "These veins, do they lead back to the forge?" She nodded. "Aye, the heart feeds the limbs." Then, from deep within the cave, came a faint sound. Footsteps, slow and heavy. The light in the crystal veins dimmed, as though the mountain itself held its breath. Arik drew his sword, motioning for silence. The steps grew louder. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in rags of frost-bitten fur. For a heartbeat, he thought it another of the Stoneborn. But when the hood fell back, a human face stared out. It was pale, cracked by cold, but alive. "You shouldn't have come back," the man rasped. "The mountain wakes." Branwen's arrow was drawn before he finished speaking. "Who are you?" "The last of the miners," he said, his voice a dry whisper. "We dug here before the war. The Lord sent us for dragon glass, but what we found was older, too old. We sealed it, but the earth broke its chains when the walkers came." He looked to Arik, eyes hollow. "You lit the forge again." Arik felt the weight of his words. "We destroyed it." The man gave a bitter laugh. "Destroyed? You scattered it. The fire runs in the veins now, beneath the ice, seeking new hearts to fill." Before Arik could reply, the man's body convulsed. His back arched, and from beneath his skin, light began to burn. A faint gold glow that spread through his veins like wildfire. His mouth opened in a silent scream as cracks split across his flesh, and in seconds his body hardened into stone. Maester Corrin stumbled backward, horrified. "It's spreading faster than before." Branwen fired her arrow, shattering the statue's face before it could move. But the sound of cracking stone echoed deeper in the cave, more shapes stirring in the dark. "Run!" Arik shouted. They fled into the blizzard outside, the mountain rumbling behind them like a beast disturbed from slumber. Snow poured down in avalanches. Lightning flashed through the storm, striking the peaks and lighting the ice in veins of molten gold. By the time they reached the lower pass, night had fallen. The storm raged around them, and somewhere far above, the mountain roared. The earth split open, and from its fissures poured light, streams of gold weaving through the snow like veins of living fire. Branwen turned, eyes wide. The mountain's birthing again. Arik gripped the shard at his belt, its light answering the storm above. "Then we end it tonight." Corrin hesitated, clutching the satchel that held the greater shard. "If we destroy both pieces, the fire might consume everything. The mountains, the woods, even the wall." Arik looked toward the peaks, where the light burned brightest. "Better ash than a world ruled by stone," And with that, he started climbing again into the storm, the others following, their figures small against the blazing heart of the mountain that awaited them above, where gods of earth and fire waited to be born anew. The climb through the storm was like ascending into another world. Snow tore across the mountainside in blinding sheets, and the wind screamed as if the very air fought to keep them away. The path that once led to the forge was gone, buried beneath avalanches in the ruin of stone. But still, they climbed. Each step was a battle, against the cold, against the wind, and against the dread that pressed down like a living weight. Arik led the way, his cloak snapping behind him like a banner of ash. The shard at his belt glowed more fiercely with each passing hour, its light throbbing in rhythm with the rumbling beneath their feet. Branwen followed close, bow clutched tight, her hair frozen into strands of white. Maester Corin came last, hunched under the weight of his satchel, every breath drawn in ragged gasps. When lightning struck the peak ahead, they saw what waited for them. The mountain's crown had split open, revealing a vast crater filled with swirling fire and mist. From its depths rose spires of molten stone, twisting like the limbs of some vast creature struggling to be born. Above the crater hovered a storm unlike any other, a whirl of black cloud laced with gold lightning, circling a core of blinding light. "The forge reborn," Corin whispered, awe and terror mingling in his voice. The fire spreads through the mountain, drawing all the veins together. It's making itself anew. Branwen spat into the snow, "Then we'll unmake it." They descended into the crater's edge, where the ground steamed beneath a crust of ice. The air shimmered with heat and cold at once, each breath burning in their lungs. All around them, fragments of the old forge lay scattered, columns of half-melted crystal, broken statues of the Stoneborn, and rivers of gold-veined magma flowing in slow, pulsing streams. Arik stopped at the rim of a vast chasm where the earth glowed from within. "This is where it began," he said quietly. Corin nodded, eyes fixed upon the molten heart. "The breath of stone must be returned here. It will call the fire home." "You mean feed it," Branwen said sharply. "That thing in your bag is what keeps them alive. Throw it in, and the mountain might tear itself apart." Corin's lips pressed thin. "Or end the curse forever." Before Arik could answer, the ground shuddered violently. From the fissures at their feet, figures began to rise. Stoneborn, half-formed and burning, their bodies cracked and glowing from within. Each step they took melted the snow beneath them, and their eyes shone like stars drowned in flame. "Run!" Arik shouted, but the creatures surrounded them in moments. Branwen loosed an arrow, the shaft blazing as it struck a Stoneborn's chest. The creature staggered, molten blood spilling from the wound, but it did not fall. Arik drew his sword, the shard's light spilling across the blade, and met the nearest monster head-on. Steel rang against stone. Sparks flew where the blade struck. The air filled with the sound of grinding earth and roaring flame. Corin struggled to open his satchel, fumbling with trembling hands. "I can still stop them," he cried. "The breath, if I speak the words carved upon the runes." But before he could finish, a Stoneborn's arm swept out, hurling him against the rocks. The satchel flew from his grasp, its contents spilling into the snow. The great shard rolled toward the chasm, teetering on the edge. Arik saw it falling and lunged, seizing it before it slipped into the molten light. The moment his fingers closed around it, the shard burned cold as death. His vision blurred, and he saw flashes, shapes of men and gods long forgotten, forging creatures from earth and flame, binding souls within stone. The deep folk. Their voices whispered in his mind, ancient and commanding. "Return the heart to the fire." The earth must breathe again. He fell to his knees, clutching the shard. The power coursed through him, filling his veins with molten fire and ice. For an instant, he felt everything: the pulse of the world, the sleeping power beneath the wall, the whisper of the far northern wastes where the dead once walked. It was all connected, bound by a single, terrible rhythm. "Arik!" Branwen shouted. "Let it go." But he could not. The shard's light consumed him, spreading up his arm in veins of gold. The mountain trembled, answering his heartbeat. The Stoneborn halted, watching as if recognizing their master. Corin crawled toward him, blood streaming from his temple. "You must end it. Cast it into the heart." "I can't," Arik gasped. "It's alive. It wants me to." Then the voice inside him spoke again. Not words, but the will of the earth itself. "You are its blood now. The fire remembers its vessel." Branwen struck him across the face, her voice fierce. "You are no vessel! You're stark blood, not stone!" The world seemed to waver. The forge's light pulsed in answer. Arik looked up at the swirling storm, the black clouds that blazed gold, and for a heartbeat, he saw faces within them. Harl, the miners, the Stoneborn, all staring, waiting. He rose unsteadily, the shard clutched tight. "If the mountain wants a heart," he said hoarsely, "then it can take mine." With a cry, he hurled the shard into the chasm. The world shattered. Light erupted from the depths, blinding, all-consuming. The Stoneborn screamed as their bodies split apart, their molten cores bursting like stars. The ground heaved, the mountains roar shaking the sky. Branwen threw herself to the ground, shielding her head. Corin tried to crawl to safety, but the earth split beneath him. Arik stood at the edge of the rift, his body wreathed in fire and frost. The light poured through him, burning away everything but the will that held him standing. For an instant, he felt the power of gods and monsters flow through his veins. Then came the cold. The fire vanished, the light dimmed, and the mountain fell silent. When the smoke cleared, Branwen was alone. The crater lay in ruins, its molten heart sealed beneath a crust of glassy stone. Of Arik, there was no sign, only the faint mark of a man's footprints leading toward the center of the crater, where a single new spire of crystal stood, its surface glowing faintly blue. Corin's broken body lay nearby. His eyes were open, staring up at the gray sky. In his hand was a scrap of parchment, torn and scorched, upon which he had written a single line: "The fire sleeps beneath the wolf's heart." Branwen stood long among the ruins, the wind keening through the valley. At last, she turned south, her bow upon her shoulder, her steps slow and heavy. Behind her, the mountain loomed silent once more, its peaks wrapped in snow. But as the sun fell and night crept over the north, a faint sound rose from deep within the earth, a slow, steady heartbeat. The mountain still lived, and somewhere within its frozen heart, so too did the fire of Sir Arik's snow. Winter's breath lay heavy over the north. Snow drifted through the woods of the Wolfswood, burying the tracks of men and beast alike, erasing the scars of the wars that had passed. The storms had ceased, yet the air carried a strange stillness, an unease that the ravens felt first, circling above Winterfell with restless wings. In the great hall, the fires burned low. Lord Cregan Stark stood before them, his gray cloak dusted with frost, his face shadowed by worry. It had been near a fortnight since he had sent Sir Arik Snow north to the Frostfangs, and no word had come back. The ravens he had dispatched never returned. Only the silence did. Beside him stood his steward, Roderick, his beard white as hoarfrost. "No message since the snows began," he said softly. The mountain clans speak of fire seen in the northern sky, red and gold like the dawn of doom. They whisper that the frost fangs burn. Cregan's jaw tightened. The walkers burned once too, and yet they rose again. I'll not have another ghostly war creeping over my walls. He turned toward the maester, a thin, hawk-nosed man named Elric, who waited near the door with a scroll in hand. You sent riders to the watch? I did, my lord, Elric said. But Castle Black answers with confusion. Their rangers say the lands beyond the wall quake at night, and sometimes the air hums like thunder beneath the ground. They think the frost fangs have cracked open. Cregan's eyes narrowed. And what of my man? Elric bowed his head. No sign of Ser Auric or his companions. The Lord of Winterfell was silent for a long time, watching the fire throw restless shadows upon the walls. If he is gone, he said at last, then let us hope he took whatever cursed thing he found with him. Yet even as he spoke, a horn sounded from the gate. The doors of the hall burst open, and 2 guards entered, dragging a cloaked figure between them. Snow fell from the stranger's shoulders in clumps. His furs were tattered, his hair wild with frost. When they pulled back his hood, a murmur rippled through the hall. It was Master Corin. He looked a ghost of himself, his face pale as death, his eyes rimmed with red. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. My lord, the mountain is awake. They took him to the master's tower, where the warmth nearly brought tears to his eyes. Cregan came soon after, his patience worn thin, his questions sharper than a blade. Speak, Corin. What happened in the frost fangs? Corin's hands shook as he reached into his satchel and drew forth a shard of crystal wrapped in cloth. It glimmered faintly even through the fabric, veins of gold winding within. We found what lay beneath the ice, the deep folk's forge, older than men, older than fire. Auric destroyed it, or tried to. The mountain broke, the fire spread into the veins of the earth. The Stoneborn rose again. Stoneborn? Roderick muttered. You speak madness, Meister. But Corin's eyes burned with fevered conviction. Not madness, truth. I saw them. Giants of rock and flame, bound by the will of the earth. Auric fought them. He used the shard's power to seal the heart, but it consumed him. The forge took him as its own. Cregan's hand clenched at his side. My brother's blood runs in that man's veins, he said darkly. You tell me he's dead? The Meister hesitated. No, my lord. Not dead. Changed. A chill deeper than winter crept through the chamber. Corin placed the shard upon the table. This is all that remains. It hums when he stirs beneath the mountain. I can feel it, his heartbeat. He is part of it now. Lord Cregan turned away, his jaw set hard. Then the north will remember his sacrifice, and the mountain will remain his tomb. But Corin did not answer. His gaze was fixed upon the shard, which pulsed faintly, as if in response to an unseen rhythm. That night, snow fell heavier than ever before. The castle slept uneasily, the fires guttering low as the wind moaned through the battlements. In his chambers, Lord Cregan dreamed of stone walls closing like fists around Winterfell. He woke before dawn to the sound of the ravens shrieking in their roost. When he reached the rookery, Maester Elric was already there, his face pale in the torchlight. The ravens beat their wings wildly, refusing food or rest. And in the center of the floor lay Corin's body, cold and still. His hand was outstretched toward the window, fingers wrapped around the cloth that had once covered the shard. The crystal itself was gone. Only a single trail of footprints led from the tower door into the snow beyond the walls, bare footprints, glowing faintly gold in the darkness, fading toward the north. Far away, beneath the shattered crown of the frost fangs, a storm gathered once more. The mountain's wound had frozen over, but beneath that crust of ice pulsed a light that grew brighter with each passing night. Deep within, where molten rivers whispered through cracks of stone, something moved. The spire that had risen where Arik fell now stood taller, veins of gold running through its surface. Beneath its translucent shell, a shape could be seen, a man's form, frozen in crystal, his eyes closed, his hand outstretched as though still casting something away. The light in his chest pulsed once, faint but steady. A heartbeat, the sound carried through the rock, echoing down into the dark caverns below, where the remnants of the Stoneborn waited. Their shattered forms began to stir, fragments knitting together, gold fire burning again in their veins. From the depths of the forge, a voice like the grinding of mountains whispered through the dark. The earth remembers its sons. The creatures rose, turning their gaze toward the surface. And in the heart of the crystal, Sir Arik Snow opened his eyes. They glowed with light, not of fire, but of something older, cold, endless, and alive. The mountain trembled. Snow fell in torrents from its slopes. The north stirred once more. In the days that followed, the clans of the mountains spoke of new tremors. Hunters vanished near the Frostfang passes. The aurora that lit the sky at night shimmered no longer green, but gold. And in Winterfell, Lord Cregan stood upon the battlements, staring toward the northern horizon where the peaks burned faintly in the dusk. "Not the walkers," he murmured. "Not this time." Behind him, a raven croaked, low, harsh, almost human. When he turned, he saw the mark it left upon the stone where it perched, a faint spiral etched into the frost, glimmering gold. The fires of the earth were waking again, and somewhere beneath the snow, the bastard son of Winterfell, once flesh, now something more, listened to the heartbeat of the world. The frost fangs loomed like the jagged bones of the world, silent beneath the pale light of dawn. Yet deep within those mountains, the silence was not peace. It was the breath before a storm. Beneath the crust of ice and stone, a new rhythm pulsed, steady, slow, like a heart long buried, but never dead. In the lowest caverns, where once the forge of the deep folk had burned, golden veins began to glow again. Molten light ran through cracks in the rock like veins of living fire. Around the ruined spire where Sir Arik Snow lay entombed, the air shimmered with heat and frost at once. Crystals grew across the walls, and the ground itself seemed to hum in answer to his heartbeat. At first, it was faint, barely a whisper. But with each beat, the mountain woke a little more. When the ice finally cracked, the sound rolled through the caverns like thunder. Fragments of crystal shattered from the spire's surface. Within, the shape of a man shifted, his chest rising with a first breath in uncounted hours. His eyes opened, not the gray of House Stark, but a luminous pale blue, threaded with veins of gold. Arik staggered forward, his boots sinking into the frost-covered stone. The world around him burned with colors that had no names. He could hear the slow groan of mountains far above, the drip of melting ice leagues away. Every sound, every tremor, every beat of the world echoed through him, as though it were part of his own body. He did not know how much time had passed, days, moons, or years, but he knew what he was not. No breath steamed in the cold air, no pain followed his movements. The shard that once burned at his belt was gone, yet its fire had become part of him. He was no longer merely a man. He knelt beside the shattered remains of the forge and pressed a hand to the ground. Beneath his palm, he felt the faint tremor of the Stoneborn. Their fragments had scattered through the mountain when the forge collapsed. Now they stirred again, called by his heartbeat. "No," he whispered, his voice low and rough as grinding stone. "Sleep." The tremors stilled, though faint echoes lingered, as if the mountain hesitated to obey. Arik rose and turned toward the cavern mouth. The air beyond was alive with gold mist and drifting snow. The world felt changed, older, hungrier. He remembered Branwen's face, her cry in the storm, and the master's last words. They were gone now, dust and memory. But the north remained, and it needed to be warned. He began the long climb back toward the surface. In the lands below, winter had not relented. The snows lay deep across the wolfswood, and the rivers ran sluggish beneath their crusts of ice. Yet the cold felt wrong, unnatural, heavy with the weight of something that did not belong. Branwen of the Free Folk rode alone through the blizzard. Her furs were ragged, her bow slung across her back, her eyes hard and watchful. She had not returned to her people since the mountain fell. Some said she had gone mad. Others said she sought the bastard who had awakened the gods of stone. But Branwen knew the truth. She had seen the light in the sky the night the mountain died, the flare of gold and fire that had split the clouds. She had felt the earth tremble beneath her feet, and the whisper of something vast moving in the depths. And now, when she closed her eyes, she could still hear the faint pulse beneath the ground. He lived. When she reached the foothills of the Frostfangs, the storm began to ease. The sky cleared to a dull, bruised gray. And there, at the edge of the world, she saw the mountain. Its crown was sealed in ice once more, but faint lines of gold gleamed beneath the surface, twisting like veins through the stone. Branwen's breath caught. "Old gods," she murmured. "What have you made of him?" She climbed higher, following the faint path that led to the old forge. Each step grew colder, though the snow hissed and melted where it touched the ground. When she reached the mouth of the cavern, she saw footprints, fresh ones, burned faintly into the ice. They were his. She followed them into the dark. Arik stood before the ruins of the forge's heart when she found him. His back was turned, his form shadowed by the light that glowed faintly beneath his skin. The air around him shimmered with heat and cold alike. "Arik," she whispered. He turned slowly. For a heartbeat, the man she had known flickered through the godlike presence before her. The same gray eyes, the same scar across his cheek. But the fire within him was something else. "Branwen," he said softly, as though testing her name. "You shouldn't have come." She took a step forward. "You died." "I burned," he corrected. "But the fire remembered me." She swallowed hard. "What are you now?" "I don't know." He looked down at his hands, flexing them as light rippled beneath the skin. "The mountain's blood runs in me. I feel its will, the same power that forged the Stoneborn. It wants to rise again. It wants to shape the world anew." "Then fight it," she said. "You're Stark blood. Fight it." He smiled faintly, sorrow in the curve of his lips. "Do you think I haven't tried? Every breath I take wakes it further. Every heartbeat calls the fire closer. It won't stop until the north is stone." Branwen drew her dagger. "Then I'll stop it for you." Arik didn't move. "You can try." For a long moment, they stared at one another. Then she lunged. The blade struck his chest and shattered. The shards fell to the ground, melting into the ice. He caught her by the wrist, his touch burning and freezing all at once. "You cannot kill what the earth has claimed," he said softly. "But you can still help me." Branwen struggled against his grip, but his strength was inhuman. "Help you do what?" "To end it, truly end it. The fire in me can't be extinguished, but it can be bound. There's a place beyond the wall, an old wound in the world where the children once sang the earth to sleep. If I reach it, I can draw the fire back into the deep." Her eyes widened. "You mean to die there?" He released her. "No, I already have." She stared at him, her breath shaking. "Then I'll go with you." "You shouldn't. I didn't come all this way to leave you again." For a moment, something like warmth flickered behind his pale eyes. "You always were stubborn. Someone has to remind you you're still human," she said. He turned toward the mouth of the cave, where the storm raged once more. "Then come, before the fire learns to walk again." By nightfall, they were gone from the mountain. The storm swallowed their tracks, erasing all trace of their passing. Yet in the depths of the frost fangs, the golden veins continued to pulse faintly, like the embers of a dying hearth. Far to the south, in Winterfell, the ground trembled once more. Lord Cregan woke in the dark, his heart pounding. He rose and crossed to the window. Beyond the walls, the snow was falling softly, but beneath it, he heard something else. A heartbeat. Slow, steady, the sound of the north remembering. And somewhere far beyond the wall, where the winds never ceased and the sky burned green and gold, two small figures moved through the storm, one of flesh, one of fire, walking toward the place where the world itself had once been born. The wild wind of the far north cut like a blade, scouring the skin and numbing the bones. The wall lay behind them now, its icy mass but a shadow on the southern horizon. Before them stretched a land few men had seen and lived to tell of. Endless plains of snow, black peaks jutting like the teeth of some vast beast, and a sky that never truly darkened nor dawned, but hung between them in eternal twilight. Arryx Snow and Branwen pressed on through that desolation, following no map, guided only by a force neither of them could name. The shard of light within Arryx's chest glowed brighter with each passing day, a faint gold flame beneath his skin. The closer they drew to the world's edge, the stronger it burned. At times, he felt the earth whisper through him, the low groan of mountains shifting, the sigh of ice cracking in the deep. The fire within him answered those sounds like an echo, stirring restlessly. Branwen saw the change in him. His voice grew softer, distant. His eyes glowed faintly, even when the night swallowed the stars. When she looked at him, she saw not the bastard she had once followed, but something larger, older, and terrible in its calm. On the 6th day, they reached the sea of frozen mist. The land dropped away into a basin where the ice was thin as glass, and beneath it shone rivers of dim blue fire, the frozen veins of the world. Arryx stopped at the edge and knelt, his palm pressed against the ice. "It's here," he murmured. "The wound." Branwen's breath steamed in the air. "The place the children made?" He nodded. "Where they sang the world to sleep. The fire sleeps still beneath it, waiting to be woken." She glanced at the endless plain, where no sound moved save the wind. "You mean to seal yourself here?" "There's no other way." Branwen's jaw tightened. "You think I'll let you die again?" He looked at her then, truly looked, and for a heartbeat she saw the man he had been, the stark blood in his face, the steel and sorrow in his eyes. "I'm not dying," he said softly. "I'm becoming what the fire cannot burn." The ground trembled beneath them. From far away came a low rumble that grew until the air itself seemed to shake. The ice cracked, great fissures tearing through its surface. Light blazed from the depths, gold and blue, twining together in wild, living streams. "They've followed," Branwen whispered. From the fissures, shapes began to climb, the stone-born, dozens of them, their bodies glimmering with molten fire, their eyes like small suns in the shadow. They had come for their heart, for the fire that Auric carried within him. Auric rose, his sword in hand. The steel shimmered gold where the light touched it. "Get behind me." Branwen drew her bow instead. "I've never been one to hide." The first of the Stoneborn advanced, its body cracking with heat, its voice a groan of shifting rock. "Return the flame to the earth," it said, its words vibrating through the air like thunder. Auric's voice rang back, steady and low. "The earth has had enough." He raised his hand and light burst forth. The Stoneborn reeled, their molten cores flickering. The power within him burned brighter, streaming through the cracks in his skin like fire through glass. The earth's voice rose in fury beneath him, the veins of light pulsing faster, harder. Branwen loosed arrow after arrow, the shaft striking true but shattering on stone. "Auric, there are too many." "I know." He spread his arms, the fire within him blazing until it outshone the sky. The air roared with wind and flame. "Keep behind me," he said again, and then he stepped forward into the storm of light. The Stoneborn converged, striking as one. Their blows split the ice, shattered rock, sent shockwaves through the frozen sea. But Auric did not fall. He stood amid the chaos, the golden flame streaming from his chest like a living river, burning through their bodies. Each creature that struck him burst apart in a cloud of molten dust, returning to the veins of the world below. Branwen watched in awe and horror. The man she knew was vanishing, piece by piece, replaced by something vast and blinding. His voice rose above the roar of the storm, no longer human, but the sound of the mountain itself. "Sleep," he commanded. "Sleep until the world ends." The Stoneborn froze mid-step. Their fires guttered and dimmed. One by one, they sank back into the ice, their forms solidifying into statues of stone. The light that had poured from the fissures withdrew, sinking deep into the earth. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the storm fell silent. Auric knelt at the center of the frozen plain, his head bowed. The glow within him flickered weakly now, each pulse slower than the last. Branwen ran to him, catching his shoulders. "Auric," she cried, "stay with me." He looked up at her with eyes that no longer held color, only light. "It's done," he whispered. "The fire sleeps." "You'll come back," she said fiercely. "You've done it once before." He smiled faintly. "Not this time." His gaze drifted to the horizon, where the aurora shimmered gold and green across the endless sky. "Tell Cregan. Tell him the North endures. Don't you dare leave me again," she said, her voice breaking. But even as she spoke, his body began to change. His skin hardened to crystal, veins of gold spreading across it. His breath slowed, then ceased altogether. When at last the transformation ended, she held only a statue in her arms, his features calm, his sword still clasped in one hand, the faintest trace of warmth left upon the hilt. Branwen bowed her head. For a long time she said nothing. The wind swept over the frozen plain, and the cracks in the ice began to close, sealing the wound. The light beneath dimmed until only faint sparks remained, twinkling like stars beneath the surface. At last, she rose. She took his sword, kissed the blade, and drove it into the ice beside him, the steel sinking deep into the frozen earth. "The North remembers," she said softly. Then she turned and walked away, her figure small against the endless snow. Behind her, the aurora flared once more, bright, golden and silent. And deep beneath the ice, far below where any living thing could go, the heart of the mountain beat one final time, slow and steady. The fire slept, but the earth remembered. And in the shadow deeps of the frost fangs, where forgotten gods dream in stone, a whisper stirred, so faint it might have been only the wind. When the snows melt, we rise again. Many years passed before the North dared whisper the name of Sir Arik Snow again. His tale became a fireside murmur, spoken only when the night was deep and the wind keened like a living thing across the wall. Some said he had perished in the frost fangs, others that he had become the mountain itself. Yet those who listened closely to the heart of the world, the miners, the rangers, the hill clans who slept close to stone, claimed they could still feel a heartbeat beneath their feet when the air was still. In Winterfell, Lord Cregan Stark had grown gray. His strength was undiminished, but the shadow of that lost expedition never left him. Some nights he would climb the battlements and stare northward, beyond the ghostly light of the aurora, toward the unseen peaks where his brother's sun had vanished. It was on such a night that the Maester came to him. "My lord," Maester Elric said, his breath misting in the cold, "a messenger from the wall has arrived. The watch sends warning. The Frostfangs burn again." Cregan's hand tightened on the parapet. "Burn?" The rangers saw fire upon the peaks. No storm, no lightning. Gold fire. They say the ground trembles as if the earth draws breath. He turned, his eyes narrowing to flint. "How many nights?" "3, my lord, each brighter than the last." Cregan said nothing for a long moment. The wind stirred his cloak, carrying with it the faint scent of snow and iron. "The watch will hold their walls," he said at last. "But if the Frostfangs wake again, the wall will not stand alone." He gave orders before dawn. Scouts were sent to the mountain passes, riders to the clans, ravens to White Harbor and Last Hearth. By noon, Winterfell was alive with movement. Blacksmiths working through the day, soldiers sharpening steel, hounds restless in their kennels. The North remembered. But far to the north, beyond the reach of any raven, the land was stirring in ways no man's eye could see. Beneath the Frostfangs, in that frozen plain where Arik Snow had fallen, the ice had begun to crack once more. The fissures ran deep, glowing faintly with the gold fire that no time could extinguish. The statue that had been Arik still knelt at the center, sword in hand, its surface half buried by centuries of frost. Yet the ice around it pulsed faintly, as though the heart within still dreamed. And one night, as the northern lights burned bright across the heavens, a sound like the sigh of wind through a cavern rolled through the mountain. The ice began to melt. The statue's eyes flickered with a pale blue light threaded with gold. The fire had slept, but the earth had not forgotten. When the mountain split, its cry echoed for leagues. Rivers of gold light ran through the cracks, winding down toward the sea. The beasts of the north fled before it, snow bears, direwolves, and great elk, their instincts driving them south. From the molten fissures rose figures of stone and crystal, not many, but enough to mark the beginning of something old reborn. The Stoneborn walked again, their forms smoother now, less monstrous, shaped by time and silence. Their eyes glowed not with fire but with cold light, as if the forge had learned patience, and from their midst, the one who had been Arik Snow awoke. He stood at the edge of the fissure, his breath misting faintly. His body was whole again, flesh and bone, though both shimmered faintly when the light touched them. He felt the pulse of the mountain in his veins, the hum of 1,000 sleeping stones waiting beneath the snow. But he also felt something else, an emptiness, a wound that burned colder than the frost. Branwen, he whispered into the wind. The name struck something deep within the earth, and for a moment, he thought he heard a voice answer. Soft, distant, carried on the storm. Then it was gone, swallowed by the endless night. Arik looked toward the south, where faint lights glimmered on the horizon. Winterfell, his home, his blood. The world had changed, yet it still called to him. He walked until the dawn came, the Stoneborn following in silence behind him. They left no footprints in the snow. The fire within them had dimmed to embers, but it was enough to warm the wind that stirred in their wake. In Winterfell, a raven came before morning. The bird was unlike any Cregan had seen, its feathers dusted with frost, its eyes a strange glint of gold. It dropped its message upon the table and flew off without sound. The scroll was sealed with ice that did not melt. When Cregan broke it, the words within were written in a hand he had not seen since his youth. The mountain breathes again. The fire sleeps no longer, but it need not wake in fury. Keep your walls, keep your steel. I will come to Winterfell before the next moon. A.S. Cregan stared at the message, his heart caught between hope and dread. Elric, he said at last, prepare the gates. If my brother's son truly returns, the North will meet him as kin. But as the Maester left, Cregan looked once more at the scroll. The ink shimmered faintly in the firelight, golden as molten ore. Weeks later, a storm rolled over the Dreadfort and last hearth alike. Men whispered of shapes walking through the blizzards, tall, silent, their eyes shining through the snow. No harm came to the villages, though the air grew heavy and the fires burned strange hues for nights afterward. When at last the storm reached Winterfell, the gates stood ready, the torches blazing high, and through the storm's heart came a figure clad in gray and gold, his face hidden by a hood of fur. Behind him marched 6 shapes that gleamed faintly in the torchlight, their movements smooth, soundless, ancient. Open the gate, Cregan commanded. Let him through. The wind roared as the portcullis lifted. The stranger stepped inside. When the hood fell back, the great hall fell silent. He bore the stark look still, the sharp lines, the cold gray eyes. But those eyes burned with light that no human should possess. Beneath the furs, faint veins of gold ran along his neck, pulsing with a heartbeat slow and deep as the earth itself. Uncle, Arik said softly. Cregan stared, his voice rough. By the old gods, you live. For now, Arik answered, but not as I was. The mountain's heart beats in me now. The fire of stone is awake, and it stirs beneath every hill from here to the sea. If it rises, it will not stop at the wall. Cregan's hand gripped the hilt of his sword. Then we will fight it. Arik shook his head. Steel will not stand against the bones of the world. The North must remember what it was before men. Before the first men, before fire and ice. The earth must be sung back to sleep. By whom? Arik's eyes gleamed like starlight on water. By me, and by those the old gods still hear. The hall fell silent save for the wind howling beyond the walls. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled in answer, its cry echoing through the night. And deep beneath Winterfell, where hot springs met old stone, the ground trembled faintly, like a heartbeat waking from dreams. The dawn that broke over Winterfell was pale and silent. Snow clung to the battlements. The godswood lay heavy beneath its weight, and the breath of the hot springs rose in faint, ghostly wisps that curled into the air. The castle had seen countless winters, but none felt quite like this one. Even the dire wolves were uneasy. Their howls had taken on a low, keening note that carried through the courtyards long after the sun rose. Within the great hall, Lord Cregan Stark sat upon the high seat of his house. The fire roared in the hearth, but its warmth did little to reach the chill that clung to the stones. Across from him stood Sir Auric Snow, or what had once been Auric. The bastard of Winterfell had returned from death, yet there was nothing of peace in his presence. His face was pale, his eyes luminous, catching the light like polished ice. When he spoke, his voice carried not only through the air, but through the bones of those who heard it, as though the earth itself echoed his words. "You said the mountain's fire spreads," Cregan said at last. "You said it moves beneath the ground, toward the south. Tell me truly, how far?" Auric's gaze drifted toward the stone floor, as if he could see the veins of the world winding beneath. "As far as the neck," he murmured. "There are cracks beneath the Dreadfort and Skagos already. The old veins wake, the fire seeking a song to guide it. And you think men can stop it? I think men can't," Auric said softly, "but the old gods can. The children sang the world to sleep once before. Their voices linger still in roots and rivers. If I can find where the first song was born, I can bind the fire again." Cregan's hands tightened upon the arms of his chair. "The children are gone." Auric's eyes flickered faintly gold. "Not all. Some fled deep into the woods. Some hid beneath the earth, where even the White Walkers could not tread. They'll hear the mountains call, just as I do. And when they come, I'll be waiting." Cregan's breath misted in the cold air. "And if they do not, then the north burns," Auric said simply. "And the fire will crawl beyond the wall, beyond the seas, until even the southern lands crumble. It will not stop at Winterfell." The silence that followed was thick as smoke. At last, Cregan rose and crossed the hall. "If I had not watched you die with my own eyes, I'd call you mad." Auric smiled faintly. "Perhaps I am. The fire in me doesn't sleep easy, but it remembers. It remembers the song that built the world, and the silence that unmade it." Cregan studied him for a long while, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned to the door. "If you mean to find these songs, you'll need men who can walk the snows and live. The free folk will not follow a Stark, but they might follow one who's walked through death. Speak to them beyond the wall. If they listen, I'll hold Winterfell till the end." Auric bowed his head in gratitude. "Thank you, my lord." "You're no lord," Cregan said quietly, "but you're still my blood." When Auric left the hall, the fire behind him hissed and dimmed, as if afraid to burn in his wake. 3 nights later, he rode north once more. The gates of Winterfell opened before him, and the cold air rolled in like a living thing. Behind him followed 6 silent figures, the Stoneborn who had come down from the mountains with him. They bore no weapons, no banners, only the light that shimmered faintly through the cracks in their bodies. The men of Winterfell watched them pass with unease, crossing themselves or whispering prayers to the old gods. Branwen rode among them. She had returned when the first word of his survival spread, drawn south by dreams of gold and fire. Her hair was streaked with white now, her face lined by cold and grief, but her eyes had lost none of their fire. "You shouldn't have come," Auric said as their horses broke into the snowfields beyond the castle walls. "I've told you before," she said, voice steady. "You'll not walk to your grave alone." He glanced at her, a trace of a smile crossing his lips. "It's not a grave I walk to, but a song." "Then I'll hear it with you," she replied. They rode through the Wolf's Wood, through the ruins of old keeps swallowed by frost, through the deep silence of the haunted forest beyond the wall. The trees grew taller there, their trunks pale and smooth, their roots twisted like sleeping serpents. Sometimes the wind carried voices, half words, half sighs, in a tongue older than men. On the 7th day, they came to a glade unlike any other. The snow lay untouched, the air heavy with the scent of pine and ice. At the center stood a single weirwood, ancient and vast, its bark white as bone, its face carved with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Arik dismounted and approached. "The heart of the song," he whispered. Branwen followed, bow in hand. "What do you hear?" He closed his eyes. "They're here." The ground shuddered, and from beneath the roots came figures small and lithe, their skin pale as birch, their eyes deep and green as moss. The children of the forest. They surrounded him without fear. One, older than the rest, stepped forward. Her hair was long and silver, her face painted with sap and ash. "Fire-bearer," she said in a voice that rustled like leaves, "why do you wake the mountain's blood?" "I didn't wake it," Arik replied. "I tried to end it." "And failed," the child said simply. He bowed his head. "Then help me do it right." The child studied him a long while, her green eyes unblinking. "You carry the Forge's song within you. It is a song of making, not ending. If you would bind it, you must give it voice once more." "Teach me," Arik said. The child smiled faintly, sad and knowing. "The song was never ours alone. It needs two voices, fire and flesh, the mountain and the heart. One cannot bind without the other." Branwen's breath caught. "Then it's me, isn't it?" Arik turned to her, the light beneath his skin flaring gold. "You don't have to." "I do," she said. "I followed you once to end the world. I'll follow you now to save it." He took her hands. They burned cold to the touch. "When we begin, there's no turning back. The fire will take everything." She smiled through her tears. "It already has." The child stepped back, raising her slender hands. The air grew thick with sound, not a melody, but a hum that vibrated through bone and breath alike. Arik joined it, his voice low, resonant, the sound of earth shifting in its sleep. Branwen followed, her tone soft as snow falling on stone. Light erupted from the ground, gold and green intertwined. The trees bent toward it, the air shimmered. The Stoneborn knelt as one, their bodies cracking with new light. And when the final note broke across the sky, it was as if the world exhaled. The trembling ceased. The fire that had run beneath the Frostfangs dimmed, retreating back into the deep earth. The snow fell softly again, untouched, unburned. When the light faded, the glade was still. The children were gone. The Stoneborn were dust. Only the weirwood stood, its carved eyes closed in peace. At its roots lay two figures, their hands clasped. Arik's body was cold, the faint veins of gold in his skin now still. Branwen's face was turned toward his, her lips curved in a quiet smile. The world was silent, save for the slow, deep heartbeat of the earth. Many generations later, the northern clans spoke of a place deep in the woods where the snow never melted and the trees whispered songs of stone and flame. Some who wandered there swore they heard voices singing beneath the earth, a man's and a woman's, woven together in endless harmony. They said it was the song that kept the world alive. And sometimes, when winter came fiercest and the mountains groaned under the weight of snow, the heartbeat of the north would echo again, slow, steady, and eternal. For the earth remembered its sons. Long after Sir Arik Snow and Branwen of the Free Folk were claimed by the Weirwood Glade, time flowed as the slow rivers do, deep and unhurried. Winters came and went, kings rose and fell, and still the north endured. The story of the man who bore the mountain's fire faded into song, and song into silence. Yet the land remembered, for the land does not forget. In the cold heart of the Wolf's Wood, there was a place no hunter dared tread. The snow fell there softer than elsewhere, muffling every step, and the trees grew close and old, their faces carved by time alone. On certain nights, when the moon was full and pale, travelers swore they could hear music, low, sorrowful, yet beautiful beyond words. And deep beneath the roots of that forest, the earth still pulsed with a faint, steady heartbeat. But men, as they ever have, forgot the lessons written in their bones. 1,000 years had passed when the North was tested again. The wall still stood, but it was thinner now, more a relic than a shield. The night's watch numbered few, outlaws and old men who remembered nothing of the long night save children's tales. Yet even in those quiet centuries, the wild North beyond the wall had begun to change. In the frost fangs, the snow no longer lay still. The ice hissed at dawn, and gold light flickered in the depths of its cracks. Hunters who strayed too close spoke of heat rising from beneath the ground, and of stones that whispered when the wind blew through the passes. The watch dismissed it as fable. Until the night, the ground itself caught fire. It began as a tremor, a low, rhythmic rumble that made the ravens shriek and the dogs howl. The men atop the wall saw it first, a glow on the northern horizon, faint at first, then growing until the sky burned with it. Gold lightning flashed through the storm clouds, and the peaks of the Frostfangs lit like torches. Lord Commander Edric Forrester stood on the icy battlements, cloak whipping in the wind, and felt the ancient dread stirring in his blood. "Sound the horn," he said, "not once, for war." 3 times the horn called, its echo rolling through the night. The watch had not sounded it in 1,000 years. Far to the south, the tremor reached Winterfell. The castle was rebuilt many times by then, walls thicker, towers higher, but the heart of it remained the same. In the Godswood, the ancient weirwood still stood, its carved face streaked with tears of sap that shone faintly gold in the starlight. Lady Alice Stark, the last of her line, knelt before it. She was young, with hair the color of ash and eyes the shade of winter skies, yet the weight of her house pressed upon her shoulders like chainmail. The North had been quiet too long, she thought, quiet like snow before an avalanche. When the earth trembled beneath her knees, she knew the waiting was done. The face of the weirwood stirred. Its mouth opened, not carved by knife, but by will, and a breath of wind sighed through the branches. "The fire sleeps no longer," the trees whispered. "The song fades. The North must remember." Alice rose, her heart pounding. In her veins she felt something old awaken, something that stirred the very roots of her bloodline. "Remember what?" she whispered to the silent trees, but the whisper was gone, leaving only the sound of her own breath and the steady creak of the branches. Days later, riders came from the wall bearing word. Fire in the Frostfangs, earth shaking, the dead stirring in their cairns. And something else. A figure seen among the peaks, tall, robed in gray, his eyes burning faintly gold. Some called him a spirit, others an omen. But the oldest among them, those who remembered the songs, spoke his name in fear. Arik Snow. Alice called her bannerman to Winterfell, though many laughed when they heard the tale. "A ghost from the age of heroes?" Lord Bolton scoffed. "Best fetch the singers to make it rhyme." But when the ground shook again, and the skies flared gold, as if the sun itself bled through the snow, no man dared mock her twice. That night the ravens came, dozens, perhaps hundreds, circling the towers in frantic cries. When they landed, Their claws left small spirals of frost burned into the stone. Alice stood in the courtyard, her cloak snapping in the wind, and looked northward. The aurora blazed above the wall, bright gold streaked with blue. It was no natural light. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "Bring the Meister," she said, "and my sword." When Meister Halwyn came, his face was grave. He carried an old tome bound in cracked leather, its pages filled with ink faded by centuries. "I found this in the archives," he said, "a record from the reign of Cregan Stark. It speaks of a bastard son sent north, one who bore the fire of the earth and sought to bind it beneath the song of the children." Alice's eyes narrowed. What became of him? No one knows. The book ends with his name and the words, "The fire sleeps beneath the wolf's heart." Alice looked toward the godswood, where the old tree loomed against the night. "Then we wake it," she said. 2 nights later, she rode for the wall. She took only a handful of men, her sworn sword, a ranger of the watch who had fled south, and Meister Halwyn, who insisted the old songs must be remembered if any were to live. The snow fell thick as she rode, blinding, endless. Wolves followed them at a distance, their eyes glinting in the dark. By the time they reached Castle Black, half her escort was gone to frost and fear. The watch opened the gates in silence. The fire from the north was visible even from there, a steady glow upon the horizon, brighter with each passing night. Lord Commander Forrester met her in the yard. "You came," he said simply. "The North must remember," she replied. He nodded. "Then you'd best see what waits beyond the wall." They climbed to the top together. From there, the world beyond lay bare before them, vast, silent, and alive with golden light. The frost fangs burned not with flame, but with veins of molten color running through their slopes, as if the mountains themselves had become lanterns, and moving between them, slow as a glacier, was a figure cloaked in gray, his shadow taller than the peaks. The fire of the world burned through his chest, and the ground trembled where he walked. Alice's heart stilled. "Sir Auric Snow," she whispered. The old Lord Commander crossed himself. Or what's left of him? The wind carried a sound to them then, a low, deep hum that vibrated through the ice beneath their feet. It was not speech, not song, but something between them both. The earth was singing. The men upon the wall stared in silence as the light spread farther south, the cracks in the ice glowing like veins of gold. Alice turned to the commander. "If he is what the songs claim, then he's not our doom." "And if he's forgotten the song?" Forrester asked grimly. She looked out at the vast, burning horizon. "Then we'll remind him." The wind rose, carrying with it a faint sound from the north. 2 voices entwined in harmony, one deep as stone, one soft as snow. The old song had begun again, and as it echoed across the frozen world, the north stirred from its long sleep. The light upon the horizon burned brighter with each passing night, until even the black stones of the wall glimmered with gold. The Night's Watch stood their posts in uneasy silence, torches trembling in their hands. The fire beyond the frost fangs did not flicker like common flame. It pulsed, like the slow, terrible heartbeat of the world itself. Lady Alice Stark felt that rhythm beneath her boots as she crossed the ice, the song of it thrumming faintly in her blood. The old words whispered by the weirwood in Winterfell haunted her still. The fire sleeps no longer. The North must remember. She had not known their meaning then, but she felt it now. Each breath she drew seemed to echo with that ancient call. Behind her came her small company. Meister Halwyn, whose aged hands clutched his scrolls even here at the end of the world. Sir Torren, her sworn sword, his cloak stiff with frost, and a handful of black-clad brothers who had sworn to lead her through the haunted lands beyond the wall. The rest of the watch would not come. "The old tales say death walks there," muttered one of the younger rangers as they fastened their cloaks against the cold. "The old tales say many things," Alice replied. "Some are only sleeping." They crossed the gate at dawn, the wind howling through its iron teeth. Beyond lay the wild expanse of the true north, a white wilderness without end. The aurora stretched across the sky in rivers of green and gold, and far to the west, a glow shimmered where the frost fangs clawed at the clouds. For 3 days they traveled. The snow beneath their feet was warm to the touch, steaming faintly as if a fire burned beneath the ice. They passed the ruins of a wildling camp, its stones melted smooth as glass. At night, the stars above flickered strangely, as though veiled by the same golden mist that clung to the mountains ahead. On the 4th evening, they reached the Valley of Dead Trees. The trunks were blackened and twisted, their bark cracked by heat long spent. The ground trembled with every breath of the wind. "The mountain's veins run beneath us," Maester Halwyn said softly. "We are walking atop the bones of gods." Alice dismounted and touched the ground. The faint hum beneath her palm made her flinch. It was not cold, but warm, alive. "No," she said, "not gods, not anymore." As the sun fell, the storm came. The wind screamed across the valley, tearing at their cloaks and driving snow like knives through the air. Through the white roar, Alice glimpsed movement, tall shapes striding through the storm, their eyes burning faintly. The Stoneborn. "Seven, save us," Torrin breathed. "They're real." "Form the line," Alice ordered, drawing her sword. "No man breaks." But the Stoneborn did not attack. They stopped 100 paces away, standing motionless as statues. The storm swirled around them, yet their bodies were untouched, glowing with veins of gold and pale fire. Then one stepped forward. He was taller than the rest, cloaked in gray. His eyes burned brighter than the aurora above, twin flames of blue and gold. When he spoke, the words rolled through the storm like thunder. "Alice Stark." The voice froze her blood. She'd heard it before, not in life, but in dream, whispering through the roots of the godswood. "Arik," she said. The figure inclined his head. "You bear the blood of my blood." She took a step forward, her sword trembling in her grip. "If you are Arik Snow, then tell me why the mountains burn again." His gaze fell to the ground. "Because the song failed." Maester Halwyn stepped forward. "You bound the fire once. The tales say you gave your life to silence it." Arik's eyes dimmed. "I gave my life, but not my soul. The fire would not let me rest. It sleeps, but it dreams. And in its dreams, it remembers how to live." "Then it must be bound again," Alice said. Arik's head lifted. "And who will sing the binding now? The children are gone, their voices faded. The North has forgotten its songs." "Not all," she said. "I hear them still. In the trees, in the stones, in my blood. The godswood told me you would come. It told me the North must remember." For a long moment, the only sound was the storm. Then Arik smiled, and it was both sorrowful and proud. Stark blood does not forget. He turned toward the mountains, where the gold fire glowed brighter now, spilling down the slopes like molten rivers. The heart of the world beats within that fire. If it wakes, it will swallow all, snow and sea, life and death alike. "Then take me there," she said. The Maester gasped. "My lady, no." "I am the wolf's heart," Alice said. "If the fire sleeps beneath it, then the song must be sung anew." Arik studied her, the wind tearing at his cloak. "You are brave," he said. But bravery cannot bind the world. Perhaps not, she replied, but blood can. He looked upon her for a long while, and at last he nodded. Then come. But once you begin, you will not return. I know. He raised his hand, and the Stoneborn parted like waves before them. Together they walked into the storm. The climb to the heart of the mountain took them through shadow and fire. The ground steamed, the air shone gold. Around them, the Stoneborn walked in silence, guardians of their sleeping forge. When they reached the summit, Alice saw the source of the light, a vast chasm splitting the world in two, filled with molten crystal that pulsed like a living thing. The fire's heart, Arik said. It remembers every hand that shaped it. He turned to her. If you sing now, the fire will listen, but it will ask for what it gave me, everything. She stepped closer to the edge. The heat scorched her face, yet she did not turn away. If it takes me, she said, then let it take my memory too. Let the world sleep and forget. He reached out, his hand trembling. You are the last of the Starks. The North will need you. The North needs peace, she whispered, not me. Then she began to sing. Her voice rose above the storm, clear and cold. It was a song of the old gods, of rivers frozen and thawed, of wolves beneath the stars. The mountain answered her, the fire trembling to her melody. Arik joined her, his voice deep as thunder, and for a moment, the world itself seemed to breathe with them. The light swelled until the air became pure gold. The Stoneborn knelt, their forms dissolving into flame. Arik reached for her hand, his own body burning from within. The North remembers, he said. I know, she answered. And as their voices joined one last time, the fire roared, and then fell silent. When dawn came, the mountains were still. The gold veins dimmed, the cracks sealed with ice. The snow fell soft and unbroken once more. Of Arik Snow and Alice Stark, no trace remained. But in the godswood of Winterfell, the weirwood's eyes glowed faintly gold, and beneath the roots, the earth hummed with a soft eternal note, the echo of a song that had bound the fire once and forever. The North slept, and the world, for a time, was at peace. Winter came heavy and endless that year. The snows fell deeper than living men could remember, swallowing fields and villages whole. From White Harbor to Bear Island, all the North lay under a pall of white, and the people whispered that the long peace was over. The bards sang no songs that season. Their breath froze before the words could form. Yet within Winterfell's gray halls, the heart of the realm still beat. Beneath the stones and the steaming springs, beneath the weight of snow and shadow, warmth lingered, ancient and patient. The castle had stood since the dawn of men, and it remembered every name, every oath, every sacrifice written in its bones. The Lady of Winterfell, Alice Stark, reborn in legend, was gone. Her kin spoke of her as one speaks of ghosts, with reverence and unease. Some said she had gone beyond the wall to end the world's fire. Others whispered she walked still beneath the snows, bound to the earth by her blood. The maesters recorded her as dead, yet the old gods wrote differently. For in the heart of the godswood, the weirwood's eyes glimmered faintly gold when the moon was full, and its branches trembled though there was no wind. The small folk left offerings beneath its roots, wolf bones, pine cones, cups of mead, and swore they heard the faint hum of a song carried through the frost. One night, long after the last harvest fire had died, the quiet was broken. A boy of 10, small and dark-haired, was found wandering the wolf's wood. His hands were bare and unscarred by frostbite, though he had walked barefoot through a storm. When the rangers brought him before the castellan, the child said only his name, Ronan, and that he had come from the snow. They questioned him for hours, but his answers remained strange and simple. "Who are your parents?" they asked. "The wolf in the mountain," he said. "And where do you come from?" "From the fire that sleeps." At first, they thought him mad, another orphan of the wild. Yet, as the days passed, the Maester grew troubled. The boy spoke of things no child should know, names of dead kings, the secret tunnels beneath Winterfell, the words carved beneath the crypts. And when he passed beneath the weirwood, the leaves turned toward him as though seeking warmth. Winterfell's lord, Cregan's blood far down the line, a grim man called Edric, kept the boy close. He was wary, yet could not deny the pull of old omens. The North had always trusted its ghosts more than its priests. Under Edric's roof, Ronan thrived. He learned the sword faster than any fosterling, though his blows carried a strange stillness. He rode the wolves of the kennels without fear, and when storms came, he would stand upon the battlements, head tilted, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. "The mountain calls," he told the Maester once. "What mountain?" the old man asked. "The one that remembers." In the long nights, when the wind howled like a dirge, Ronan would walk the halls barefoot. The guards learned not to stop him. He always ended in the crypts where the kings of winter slept in stone. There, before the statue of Alice Stark, her sword of bronze and her face carved in calm repose, he would kneel. "Mother of songs," he would whisper, "the fire stirs again." The following spring brought no thaw. The rivers remained locked beneath their ice, and the sun rose pale and distant, giving no heat. The shepherds spoke of strange lights in the north, gold and blue like the aurora, dancing across the sky for nights at a time. The Maester called it a trick of the air, yet when the ground began to tremble beneath their feet, his ink froze mid-word. Ronan stood in the courtyard that night, staring north. "It wakes," he said quietly. Edric joined him. "What wakes?" "The heart of the world. The song we silenced has begun again." The Lord frowned. "What can a song do to men?" Ronan's eyes, pale gray as ice, glowed faintly in the dark. "It can teach the earth to move." Before dawn, the first quake struck. Stones fell from the towers, the wells boiled, and deep beneath the crypts, something groaned, a slow, resonant sound that shook the wolves to their bellies. In the chaos, Ronan vanished. The gates had not opened. The guards had not seen him leave. Only a single trail of prints led from the God's Wood, across the frozen moat, and into the night beyond the walls. The next day, the snows began to fall gold. In the frost fangs, the earth split again. From the fissures rose pillars of crystal and stone, shining like spears against the pale sun. The fire that had once been bound beneath the world pulsed anew, its light weaving through the mountains like veins of molten ore. And there, upon the edge of the world, a boy stood barefoot upon the ice, his hair whipped in the wind, his eyes reflecting the storm. The air around him shimmered with faint light, and when he raised his hand, the tremors stilled. From the depths of the mountain came a whisper, deep, ancient, familiar. "Child of fire, child of wolf, the world turns again." Ronan bowed his head. "The song is not finished. Then sing it anew." He closed his eyes. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint echo of voices long vanished. Aric's deep tone, Branwen's clear cry, Alice's steady refrain. He joined them, his small voice weaving through their melody like a new thread in an old tapestry. The light from the fissures rose, swirling into the air until it filled the sky. For miles, The heavens burned gold and green, brighter than day. The mountains groaned, the rivers burst free of their ice, and the fire that had slept beneath the north for centuries sighed once more, and was still. When the light faded, the boy was gone. Years later, travelers told of a figure seen wandering the woods of the north, a youth with eyes of molten gold, barefoot in the snow. The beasts did not flee from him, nor did the storms touch him. Some said he was a spirit, others a god reborn. But among the old houses, the tale grew of a boy who sang to the earth and bade it sleep again. And in Winterfell, the weirwood's face changed. Its eyes, once red as blood, gleamed faintly gold in the moonlight, and beneath its roots, where hot water met cold stone, a new sprout grew, its bark streaked white and gold like the dawn. The Meisters wrote that it was a trick of nature. The North knew better. For when the wind rose and the snow whispered through the branches, the people heard the faintest hum, 3 voices entwined in one. The fire sleeps, the wolf watches, and the world endures. Thus ended the tale of the fire beneath the north, and the line of those who bore it. But in the heartbeat of the earth, faint and steady beneath the endless snow, the song lingered still, waiting for the day it would be needed once more.